All right. All right, here we go. Yes. I am now
Okay,
recording.
so nice, nice, nice. So do you start?
Uh, sure, why not? Um, on news there's this phenomena down in Texas. Uh, everyone internationally knows Texas. Texas is one of the most notorious states within and outside of the United States for a multitude of reasons, but most notably being exactly what the stereotypical American is, overweight
I can
issues,
always think of guns.
cowboys, guns, uh, just the sort of like overly patriotic right-wing American. And the crisis in Texas really is that this is not really the majority of the population there. Um and they're one of the
Are
many
there like
states that
are there like neckbeards and shit in Texas?
neckbeards in Texas, not really. Texas is
Uh,
really hot. It's more of the the quote unquote right wing libertarian types that you'd find down there, not the
no,
neckbeard east west coast types. Although you do
I
get a
see.
lot of neckbeards in the Midwest. Um, but yeah, the issue is Texas is a very, I mean, they're really only like 40% white. Everything else, you're either Hispanic white or you're black or you're Asian. None of the race matters, but in regards to the perception of what Texas is, and especially all their elected politicians, race does matter. And they're passing all these voter reform laws that are just anti-democratic, making it harder to vote, especially for minorities. And they've just edited their education system, where essentially, not even essentially, just directly, they don't want to pollute the name of the Confederacy. So they've already like years ago removed stuff, and they've instituted in schools where they have to talk about how slavery is good, how slavery was a good thing for black people. This is just completely untrue. It's awful. And now they're removing Martin Luther King Jr. and they're
Oh,
also
I
trying.
saw that.
And now they're taking
It was
this.
from Texas. I didn't know that.
Well, this is a phenomena throughout the South, but Texas is just they're like the worst. They're fish.
Holy
Be
shit!
quiet. He's like an 11-pound dog.
I saw they wanted to take away Civil War uh,
Mm.
subjects on the
Yes. Hold on.
schools and
Give
shit.
me a moment. I need to open the door. What? Oh. Hi. What are you doing? Huh? I'm getting my PS4. Oh yeah. That's right. All right, I am back.
Okay.
Shit. Yes. Yes. Fuck. What were you saying? The Confederacy. Yes.
The Yeah, they're taking away the Civil War subject on schools, or they trying to take away.
Well, it's not really just the Civil War subject in its entirety. As I said before yesterday, uneducation isn't the issue, it's indoctrination. And what they're doing is rewriting the entirety of what the Civil War was. They're trying to make every one of the Confederate generals seem like these great people, and the Confederates were fighting for the notorious and ubiquitous and genuinely just awful term of states' rights, as if that was ever the
And
issue that caused the Civil War in the first place. And it's just part of the many, many things Texas has always done to continuously marginalize their minority. Well, even again, not even minority population, but just the population of people who aren't white. Um, because if things were truly democratic down there, the Texas would be a blue state. They'd be voting Democrat. They have to go through all this incredibly shady stuff to get Republicans elected. um, like with these congressional districts and everything. It's just awful.
I'm not sure how exactly it works, but U.S. elections work something like there's the voters, right? The voters. There's
Behind the Texas
something
office.
involving I don't know. I don't know how to explain this, but it's not only the people who elect the state officials, right?
Yes.
It's not only okay.
State officials are definitely the worst case. I don't know how exactly it is everywhere, but a lot of cases still rely on an electoral college system, which is it's it's the worst idea ever. It's like, okay, we have votes, but then we hand these vote results off to someone, and their goal is to take that into consideration on who they're voting for. Now, throughout history, it's never actually been overtly an issue per se, um,
I see.
because no one has really received an electoral college vote and then just decided to vote the exact opposite of what they're supposed to. However, what it does is marginalize urban communities in comparison to rural communities. And the argument is, see, ironically, the argument often brought up by rural communities is if we didn't have the electoral college, it'd be the rural communities being oppressed. There has to be some sort of equivalency of power, and obviously the only genuine solution for that is decentralization. But no one wants to push for that. The federal government has been continuously strengthened while states have continuously lost less rights. Ironically, especially in the South. Um,
Hmm.
and fuck,
Yeah.
state pushing for the fuck. I lost my train of thought. I was
you're,
mentioning voter form,
you're talking
the
about how
electoral
the
college. Yes,
South.
yes, but
Yeah.
that point even admits that they're oppressing urban people through the electoral college, and in the end, I'm personally torn on this because both people
You're
need to be
personally what?
heard.
I can hear. I can clearly hear you. What did you say? I'm personally what?
I'm torn on this subject because
Oh, okay.
obviously the rural communities need to be heard and need to be able to solve their own issues. But the urban communities have the majority of the people and therefore should have the majority at stake when it comes to national elections. But they really don't.
I mean, this whole thing about like broadly speaking, but this whole thing between the the rural part of the states and the more urban cities, it has always been very problematic to say at the very least. For instance, the Boer has a on the Society of a Spectacle. He has a very interesting take on this. He says that it's actually good that we're getting more urbanized. That we're uh, being placed within a more centralized city. Metropolitan cities and stuff like this, because this actually will raise more the masses. The proletariat masses to go and radicalize themselves. So I'm not so sure about this because I mean he uses the argument that the the poor people in the rural areas, the countryside, they usually don't form a historical kind of proletariat. They don't have the historical conscience.
They're the
They're
peasants.
mostly yeah the peasants. They're mostly led by some sort of belief, either be it a more reactionary kind of belief like God and stuff like this, or just a more they prioritize a lot of hierarchies. Historically speaking, in Europe and even in Brazil. I mean, in Brazil, it's a very complicated issue because we only got urbanized like a little bit before the mid 19th century, in 19th century, because as we were a colony of exploration, we nobody came here to live here to actually live here, just sent criminals so they could establish the land to Portugal, sent criminals to establish the land to themselves. And what happened is that basically we got a very decentralized kind of an anarcho-capitalist society because we in Brazil there like it constituted a lot of like families. Imagine like aristocratic families, but they're separated. That there's no central government.
But they're
And
wealthy landowners.
yeah, well, exactly. It's like feudalism, pretty much. And they basically formed their own communities. With the landlord and shit like this. they had their own services. You know, they had like uh tapestry. They had how do I say that? Like uh, it's basically artistry. You know, like doing vases and stuff like this.
Ceramics?
But then, yeah, ceramics exactly. And they had all these services. You know, these common services. So in Brazil, for a long time, we've basically been an anarcho-capitalist society where everything is pretty much separated. There's no central government. The laws were pretty finicky. You know, they didn't apply everywhere. They were pretty regional, and and because of that, a lot of the revolts had to happen here were pretty small or didn't change much. You know, like you had the it's Guerra de Farrapos, né, in Portuguese. I don't know how to translate it in English, but it's basically two cities starting fighting each other. You know, it didn't lead to much. Never had a sort of national sense. So in a certain way, yeah, the peasants never, historically speaking, never constitute a very good uh, force of the future. You know, especially not a socialist force. But I don't think the urban cities also, you know, were inherently radicalized. You
Yeah.
know, I don't think the board is correct on this,
Yeah.
especially on modern standards where we're so dominated by ideology. As you said, they're even trying to change the subject in schools. You know, and
Yes.
we're all accepting stuff.
Well,
It's it's kind of hard, you know, to imagine a
well,
radicalized world today.
two
Mm.
things. I'd like to point out, the very obvious and interesting carryover of the landlord aristocracy under feudalism, and that system obviously still existing even to today in rural communities. Like I know, especially where I live in Ohio, you'll have people living in just rundown homes or trailer parks, and then you'll have the guy who owns like 20 or 40 acres of field right next to you, and whether he farms or not, he's still getting paid a whole lot of money for just owning that land, whether it's for farming or by the federal government to not farm. And those people are the ones who have the really nice cars, the really nice Jeeps, the helicopters, the ones who do all the fireworks shows, and yet at the same time, deprive the community of a lot. Like that.
Yeah, yeah, it's like I didn't mention before. I should have mentioned, but there's also like a movement in Brazil. It's called the MST. It's basically a movement to take away these lands, you know, to give to the people who actually need this, who actually will. Because, as you said, especially in Brazil, there's a lot of problem of a lot of land not being used. You know, it's owned by someone, but it's not used for nothing really. They don't give away. You know, so the MST tries to take these lands, give to people who actually use this. You know, so I mean, it's a clear indication of a peasant force. You know, a peasant socialist force, because
Well,
the MST is a socialist movement.
I would like to
Mm.
say, if that's certainly the case in Brazil, it's the opposite of the case here. Mostly because people
Uh,
in rural environments have been culturally and socially told, to value their land and value their property, no matter how minuscule it is, and then therefore respect the property of the more wealthier aristocrats in an effort to ensure the security of their own property. And it leads to this very anti-socialist and anti-liberal view, anti any kind of reform, even those that would help them. Any government overreach is considered bad. But at the same time, these people also complain about businesses. They but they don't really do anything about businesses, but will do mass protest if it's anything in regards to the government. Uh, but
but they're
more
like
in,
very atomized. Like everyone's pretty individualized in the rural area.
No, but yeah,
No,
yeah, no, no, not at all. Rural communities, ironically, maybe this just has to do with natural social distance, but having been in urban areas and having been in rural areas, I would say people in rural areas are very desperate for social connection, and it leads to drama, but it leads to an area where you're a lot more connected than you would be in an urban area, which has its pros and it has its cons. But in America, especially, and it's just a known fact, beyond just the Democrat Republican um, dichotomy between urban areas and rural areas. There are consistently more socialists in urban areas because there's more people in need of assistance in those areas, a lot more homeless, a lot more people who are going to be homeless. And so there's a lot more support for programs that get people up on their knees again. Public housing, a lot of I forgot what they're called. The places that like recycle food and give them to people. Uh, they have a name. A lot. There's
Shelter?
no,
I
not
don't know.
not shelters, but yes, there is also a lot of support for homeless shelters as well, beyond just public housing there. And at the same time, this has been going on for so long. In a lot of cities, you actually see these socialist projects unfold and do a lot of good for the community. Stuff where they're planting trees and doing proper like land reform, which is why urban areas have much less pollution than rural areas. And well, rural areas also have less pollution. The issue has always been the suburbs, which I don't know if that phenomena has happened in Brazil, and I certainly hope it doesn't, because the suburbs are just this awful idea. So I want you to think to yourself, how do you market to someone your typical apartment, but you make it seem like it's worth a lot more, but it just requires more work and basically is just an overall negative on a person whilst making them feel like it's makes them secure. Well, you get a piece of land and you put a house on it, and you put as much house and very little land on it. So it's just, they own the house and it's kind of like owning the land, but you just own like a strip of grass in your backyard or in your front yard that you have to handle and you have to take care of, and you're paying equal price to an apartment under the illusion that you own it. But if you fail to pay your mortgage, well, the house will be taken by the bank. You
I
know,
think like it's like the initial setting Fallout 4, right? Something like this.
the what?
The initial city in Fallout 4 before
Oh,
the whole
Sanctuary
downgrade
Hills.
appeared.
Yes, exactly. That is your
Yeah.
typical. Well, it's not a real suburban community. Suburbs are nowhere near that good looking. That would be your upper middle class stereotypical one, but believe me, those don't exist. They've never existed. They're often much worse. They're much more boring. All the houses are basically the same. They're really cheaply made. They're like constructed in like a year, and they're just rush jobs trying to like inflate local property value and prices. The roads are awful. People are forced to drive cars through it. No one wants to walk through these because it's just terribly designed roads and everything. And there's always like higher crime rates in these areas. And really, it's this notion of selling to someone that you're well off when you aren't. They're doing everything to try and peddle and remake the American dream, which they have, and it's long in the state of maturity, but now it's falling apart because after the 2009 housing market crash, people can no longer truly afford these down payments that you need to get on your mortgage loan to own these houses, and so everything's moving towards renting. And despite the fact that in a lot of cases renting is functionally no different for you in your life other than the abstract notion that you own the house in 30 years, as if it won't be sold off by your kids to pay for your funeral, there's no difference between renting other than like the feeling that that you own it. In one case, it's you're paying money to the landlord who pays the bank, and in the other way, you're paying the bank. All it is different layers of abstraction. It's still the same systemic oppression. And so
Yeah.
now
Well,
there's this fight back against renting because more people are like, oh, I want to own homes. But you'll never own the home. It's and even worse, they're trying to like peddle this old bourgeois notion of like private property to these people, but not legally. It's the feeling of private property, but in any legal or domestic court case, it most certainly isn't unless you have like a fence up and town hall approval and private property signs every like 5 feet. And even then, it's not private property to the federal government
I see.
because the
I'm
word
interested in what you said before about how the countryside is more social, as you said. No, they're in more need of social relations, so they're They have like this kind of anxiety. I don't
Yeah.
know if I could
I wouldn't
characterize
say
this as
it's
anxiety.
anxiety. They're very
Yeah,
close. Communities in rural areas, even in like Ohio, where it goes from rural to suburbs to urban very quickly, the rural communities are a lot more active on social media and in the modern sense. And even before then, there's a lot more like celebrations and parties and stuff going on because there's this intricate social sphere, one that's very lacking in the suburbs, one that's almost one that's different in the urban areas.
yeah, I see. I wanted to comment on that because I think, because like think just imagine your average urban area and your average rural area, and you think about like the stuff you gotta do right on your day to day life, and like in urban cities you're pretty much stuck all day. You gotta go do that and then go do that and do your job, and maybe you have to do two or more jobs because you can't
Well, it's the
pay
same
your
thing in the rural
college or
areas. In America, it doesn't really matter where you live unless it's like a wealthy community. The rural, urban, and suburban divide doesn't directly indicate wealth in any sense. There's people in all those areas working two jobs, and really, no, yeah, go on. Yes.
Yeah, I actually imagine it's because I don't know the reality of America, but in Brazil there's, I wouldn't say plenty because they're mostly being bought by landowners and stuff. It's pretty sad, but there's still you can see like in Minas Gerais and stuff some small landowners that they're like small farmers basically, and they do not use like agrotoxic. Is this in English? Am I correct? Agrotoxic.
Uh, like, uh, eh, like, um, like pesticides.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not sure if this is the correct term in English. Just, going with the false cognatus. But
Mm,
anyway, I think you got the point, right?
yes.
Anyway, so anyway, these lands these farms are not so focused on selling, commercially. They're focusing on selling for survival, right? Uh, it's a it's characterized as community plantation,
Hmm.
and uh, these people they usually like you gotta wait, right? It's a farm job. You gotta wait. You do stuff. Of course, you work hard and stuff. It's a lot of labor. There's a lot of labor involved. But most of the time, you're just there. See stuff happens. You gotta wait for stuff to grow. Actually, like this. Well, it's different, however, in urban landscapes because you're always, especially like in cities like São Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, whatever. It's Brazilian cities, by the way. Um, and it's very different because in these cities you have to like do a lot of stuff. Go to the bank, I don't know, pay a loan. I don't know. You have to do a lot of stuff on your day to day basis, and it's interesting that you said about this whole community. The countryside community is more close together. They're more communicative with each other, or at least they need this communication.
It's not, well,
And
the communication exists. It's not always the healthiest or the safest of communications, but they're a lot more active socially than urban areas
oh, yeah, yeah,
and
exactly.
suburb.
That's
And the
yeah.
suburbs are just
Anyway,
dead socially.
but as I was saying, and it's not this more socially intricate kind of community is not possible in such an urban landscape because of as I said, you're doing a lot of stuff. It's a very individualized. It's like urban cities are the perfect capitalist utopia or dystopia in this case, right? Because everyone is pretty individualized. You have so much stuff to worry about your life that you don't notice the people around you and stuff like this. So uh, you have more concentration of people, but ironically, they're more individualized, more atomized than ever before. Even though there's again more people. So again, going back to that notion by the board, it's kind of problematic to imagine this because yeah, okay, we are. close together, we can, form unions, and we can radicalize ourselves, or, as we have a lot of people and stuff, a lot of oppressed people, by the way. But this also means there's a lot of peripheral people who are being, cast away, who are being excluded. And that also means that we're, because of so much work we have to do. And this goes back to the whole lost futures brought by Mark Fisher. Um, because of this, we cannot radicalize. We're so caught up by our day to day lives, the adult life and shit, that it's just too hard to radicalize, to fully
Abs-
radicalize, not become just a
Absolutely.
social
It's
democrat or whatever.
it's the same issue with leftists in America. You know, it's always the comparison of, oh, people benefit under capitalism and yet complain about it. No, you're living under capitalism. There's no choice in capitalism. You either succeed or you suffer. And so when leftists succeed out of a natural like survival defense mechanism, because in capitalism you have to have a lot of like monetary cushion if you want any sense of security. It's endless criticisms, and what this leads to is really it's systematic entrapment. You're so caught in surviving in the system, the time necessary to take to oppose the system or to figure out how exactly to oppose the system is lost.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And also, I mean, you mentioned the criticizing that comes from the right. Oh, you're the whole thing. Oh, you're a communist and you own an iPhone. Oh my fucking gosh, because
iPhone
you know,
Venezuela, iPhone Venezuela.
this, yeah. But also sometimes I see criticism from the left. Like they see some middle class folk trying to radicalize themselves, and they think, "Whoa, what the fuck? This motherfucker is like super rich. Why is he trying to portray himself as a socialist? We're the real socialists and stuff." And I mean, it's a very torn subject for me. I mean, I get very divided because I am from middle class,
Well,
and I have total conscience that I am privileged and stuff. But and I can't say I really suffer as much as I don't know, a worker, a labor, more labor hard worker, But I'm also part of the proletariat, if I want it or not. But yeah, as I said, I can't say I really suffer as much of these as these people. So I get really divided. I don't know if how I should portray, how I should behave and stuff like this. Anyway, it's kind of a interesting subject. I want to hear your take on this.
well, it's important to understand that capitalist culture wants to portray people who succeed and people who are getting by not as privileged, but as people getting in the system. And it wants to portray those as those who are being oppressed by the system or those who just fail the system, even as with the objective I ascribed to them incorrectly. People who are like destroyed by the system, they want to portray them as failures, people who are naturally incompatible with the system and incompatible with real life. And so naturally, when a lot of those people or people who are lower level on the the tiers of capitalism, if there ever really is one, um, will look at that and say, this is the true way of living, and anything above this is privileged. More so than that being divisive, I would say it's it's in the right path. There certainly is a lot of privilege, but unless you're born incredibly rich, I couldn't say that there's a lot of direct privilege when it comes to those who are middle class. People who are middle class, there people who are middle class are infinitely closer to homeless people than they will ever be to rich people.
Yeah, that's for
They
sure.
they
That's
just
for sure.
serve a more publicly perceived role in society. They're always featured in the media. Whenever a country wants to portray its citizens, it's never going to look at its best because that's going to seem dissonant to people, and it's never going to look to its worst off citizens because that's going to be too honest and that's going to be a dangerous. So they always go to the middle class because that's just enough of honesty and realism and a cushy softness for them to make their media off of, and it just leaves this middle class looking a lot better than it actually is. It makes people in the middle class feel a lot better off than they are, especially when they work, a lot of important jobs in society, but not the severely important jobs in society all the time. And it's
And
just
then
it's divisive.
yeah, because I also get a little bit. I always say I have to admit my sins. I don't know if it's much of a sin because these people really get my nerves. There's like a lot of middle class people who says they're socialists and stuff, but they're like social democrat at best, and they usually fetishize consumerism and consumerism culture. I don't know if it's called consumerism culture, but anyway, uh, and these people just get on my nerves. Like they're usually middle class. I'm also part of the middle class. Hope I'm not like that though. So yeah, that's good, I suppose. But like people who also fetishize, as we were saying or as we were speaking less time. People who fetishize the poor, think, oh yeah, they're the real free people. No, this is just oh man, it gets to my nerves. It's
Mm.
usually middle class people who are like hippies and stuff like this.
Okay, well, I there's a lot I have to say, but I want to point out something very important, and I think Ugopnik made a video on this. Notice how modest, how poor people are made to seem modest, and therefore are just idolized. You know, it's this idea where because you're poor, you're more morally well off, and that's just no, that's just not even the point. Your morality isn't really based on your wealth. They're as much as it would seem to be the other way, and as much as wealth can definitely influence your perception of morality and ethics, especially as you get wealthier and wealthier, you don't become a super ethical, super moral creature when you're poor. And furthermore, in regards to the middle class consumerist phenomena, you have to understand you have to be a consumerist to become a part of the middle class. You can't be successful, but if you're active in the economy, you can reach middle class. But at the same time, a lot of these people come from the third class, come from the poor, so they realize, the kind of moral dissonance. But the greatest part of consumer culture is this charity syndrome, the idea where we could just pass laws or throw money at a problem and expect it to solve the issue. And it's the idea
What
where,
you mean, like stuff like ONGs and stuff like non-government organizations?
yeah,
You
yes,
mean
not non-government
like
organizations where you put money to it and they try to solve the issue somehow, some way. They never work.
uh, yeah, the whole charity thing, right? Stuff
Yes,
like this.
because
I know.
only state programs have the simultaneous amount of authority, power, and capability to solve social issues. And under neoliberal capitalism, the state doing that is dictatorship, wrong, and should never be done, unless it's a crisis. Ironic.
And also, these are usually very like they're like a small band-aid for a problem that is much bigger. Usually, they don't do much for the proletariat or the world itself.
Well, it's not the charity's fault, and it's not the
No, yeah, no,
people who
no.
donate to its
I'm
fault.
just
It's they
trying.
can't possibly, with the amount of wealth that they have, solve any of these issues. Even if there was, if Jeff Bezos' legendary $100 billion global warming charity, like, oh, okay, yes, we're going to throw money at global warming and expect it to solve it. Yes, totally. That's definitely going to work. Your $100 billion is going to convince capitalists to, adjust themselves significantly to stop global warming. Oh, yes. And as if that won't
Yeah, no,
undo the damage
uh,
already done.
yeah, I'm not like blaming non-government organizations. I'm just saying they're like a symptom of the system that
Yes,
just tries to pretend it's working on something, working on the well-being of people, but it's
absolutely. You know,
and I mean you touched it on morality. I wanna hear what you think about it. Do you think our goals should be marked by moral visions, or do we have to be truly materialist in our dreams of a better future and
well,
whatever?
I think a lot of people and this goes for the entirety of the human race, would define humanity within a realm of morality and ethics before they would ever define it in materials, due to our inherent conscious nature and our subjective nature before and our like objective reality. So it would definitely be a government's task to solve material issues, but they'd have to do it through a lot of moral and ethical lenses, or else they would never be approved of by the people. And the issue
Yeah,
always is when you are able to culturally influence morals and ethics for a significant period of time to your own benefit, try to paint legitimate issues as issues that are just should not be solved by the government and therefore are unable to be solved by anyone, those issues persevere. And I think the worst part is, and it's especially the case with global warming, even those who accept global warming are incapable of doing anything about it, and those who may be capable, and honestly, all of us as a collective are certainly capable, are just unwilling to do it. It did not in accepting that there is a problem. We only succeed in nullifying it. I don't know how the case is in Brazil, but here in America, under Donald Trump, there was all like COVID was a nightmare. But now that Biden is president and the administration is honest, it's kind of like the problem has been nullified, even though the Delta variant is literally thrashing this nation, and it's going to be the worst this nation has ever felt. Now, oh,
I think
and notice how I say nation in this sense before I said country in our last conversation, because it's only in these massive social issues that don't see race, don't see language, don't see culture, don't see any of the things that make us an American country, does America become a nation.
I think Zizek has talked about something related to this. It's not exactly this, but also Mark Fisher pointed out about the distance we take from an ironic perspective, right? As Mark Fisher puts, Disney already does our activism for us, right?
Yes,
Because
Wally. I read
like,
that part of Capitalist Realism. It's amazing.
yeah, it's great. It's great because we're like, oh yeah, I know the system is bad. I'm not gonna do anything to change it, but I know. I mean, at least I know, right?
I know
At
this
least
is
I'm
our
part of the
future.
good guys.
This future
Yeah,
is bad.
I'm part of the good guys, right, guys?
Now
Right,
let now
people?
let's now let's continue consuming. We'll leave the solution to Elon Musk. He most definitely knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, and there's people like, for instance, the we have the typical phrase, in left-leaning circles, like, there's no ethical consumption under capitalism, right?
Yes,
And some people interpret, I mean, how the fuck can you do that? But some people interpret it as, okay, if there's no ethical consumption, then I'm just gonna consume nonstop. Like, no, dude, it's not the point
absolutely.
of the phrase, you know?
And
It's it's crazy
well,
how people can get to these
I think,
conclusions.
you know, the issue is modern politics inherently leans towards polarization. And so when you hear there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, if you don't put critical thought towards it, that means you either don't consume or you always consume. And that's not at all what that statement means.
And also, it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of it's not related, but it's kind of related to this stuff. But anyway, it's about a thing that Nietzsche talked about in his book about the he kind of does a history of the pre-Socratic philosophers, and he talks about how these philosophers live their philosophy and stuff. And once I talked to my friend and I was discussing with him and saying stuff like and I was discussing with him how we don't live our philosophy, right? I was talking to him, and I came to the conclusion that I actually debate more philosophy than I actually live my own philosophy, right? And but it's kind of also complicated. Like, for instance, I'm obviously a Marxist, so I, quote unquote, should not consume under capitalism, but it's simply not possible, not even on a level like, oh, just gonna consume the enough for me to survive. But propaganda also gets me. I like to, for instance, I like to consume a lot of books. I buy a lot of books. I spend a lot of my money on this, and I know it's like not necessary. Much of these books, there are PDFs and stuff, but I get caught by this. I get caught by
Well,
this whole consumerist. Again,
consumer
I
theory
couldn't think.
almost, you know? I think it's really
Yeah,
interesting actually, because books have existed since before capitalism, and reading them and studying them was normal. But it's obvious that there was a huge paradigm shift under capitalism that education became like a consumption process where you
Yeah,
consume media, l- learn
and
from
also
it.
because the public spaces are going out, right? I mean, you take Alexandria for instance. The scholars would go for the library and they would study and talk to each other and stuff like this. We just don't have this anymore, right?
Yes.
Uh, I mean, we kind of have. I'm not saying there's no libraries anymore, but well, they're usually dying out. Mostly most libraries, at least in Brazil, are dying out. You know, there are just a few left, not much, and they're closed because of COVID and stuff.
If you think
Yeah,
about it, the internet is the modern capitalist Library of Alexandria with its marketing and its new liberal ideals of providing it to everyone regardless and platforming everyone. It's this awful perversion of, you know, the historical perception of what the Great Library of Alexandria was.
indeed.
It's a
I mean,
it's
that's why I like. I mean, and most of these sites and stuff, they usually hide their academic stuff behind a paywall. So I
mm,
like stuff like the Sci Hub, which pirates all these stuff and gives for free. I think even the academics themselves, because they don't get paid, but so even then might enjoy, that their work is being pirated and
the
distributed for free.
well the beauty of the internet is despite its the internet is held up by one important facet of it, and that it is certainly the platform of the people. No matter how much businesses want to control it and do control it, there will always be ways around pay for it, like consumerism that you like have to pay for the idea that you need to consume these books and these studies and stuff that should be quite clearly provided without a paywall.
Yeah,
And this is certainly proof of like wealthier people being more privileged, but at the same time also proof that you could certainly work around certain portions of when it comes to knowledge in regards to privilege. You can be a very poor person, but so long as you have access to some form of technology and some form of internet, and you are educated on how to use it, it is the most important, most liberating, and most powerful tool.
yeah. I mean, one of the main ideas of Foucault, albeit I sometimes think it's a bit optimistic, but he says that resistance is always bigger, is always stronger than power, because resistance actually actively, shows enough conflict to make power adapt. So it's always the resistance that brings adaptation to power. So it's a constant fight that goes on for ages, again and again and again. It's again a fight that never ends. Basically, I think
Certainly.
it also applies here.
I don't think the fight that never ends is incredibly optimistic, however, but
Yeah, I mean, it's optimistic, the idea that resistance will always win. We will always be stronger and stuff. I don't think
well,
that's so true.
I mean, resistance always makes power adapt. We've seen this a lot with, in America we had Black Lives Matter, which responded with the Blue Lives movement, which is so idiosyncratic. Like, we had this one police officer about 17 miles where George Floyd was killed. She intended to pull her taser out. She instead pulled a gun out and killed him. Shot the guy right there. I think he was like 19 or he was 17 or something. He was really young. It was a really terrible thing. She should absolutely not only be stripped of her position, but go to prison for it, this act of murder, no matter how you want to look at it. And their response was to fly the Blue Lives Matter flag uh, uh, at the police station. Like what? It's who died here?
Yeah,
Who like
I mean,
you don't? I mean,
you might say it's like an adaptation. Like they got scared and they're trying to, because well, they're called reactionaries for a
well, yeah,
reason, right?
well,
They
yeah,
react,
certainly.
right? But like, my fear is that, well, do we ever get the upper hand? Like, do we leftists ever get the upper hand in
Well,
in this neoliberal landscape that we live in
well,
today?
okay. So I think it's important. I think the greatest look at it would be the 2008 to 2016, yeah, spectacle of Obama's presidency, where it started off where there was basically nothing from the left, nothing at all. They were truly blue Republicans at that point, and slowly but surely, as millennials got more and more power, things began changing, and then you see Antifa and you see Black Lives Matter, but these are small organizations. And then even the smallest hint of any sort of like organized leftist movement brings out reactionaries by the millions and Trump gets elected, even though he lost the popular vote by millions. Again, with the electoral college
Yeah,
thing. Even the smallest hint of organization against the system will garner a whole lot more reactionaries. And what did that lead to? Well, these leftist movements quintupled in size, and now they're far larger than the reactionary movements. And what did that lead to? Well, most, if not all people, don't like Biden. But when given the choice of removing Trump, many, many millions more said yes. To the point that reactionaries, I think it's an interesting phenomenon actually. This sort of dialectic between American reactionaries and like American um, radlibs, radical liberals, not in the sense of the neoliberals, but the American liberal sense, which are still intrinsically tied to a lot of neoliberal ideals. But they're constantly at a reaction state, and it's shocking for a lot of reactionaries. The idea of people reacting to them. The idea that these movements could be anti them, and the idea of calling out these movements for their obvious racism and systemic police brutality and just systemic capitalism.
yeah, that makes sense.
It's why
Thinking
I
about it.
I always like to think of the term like left reactionaries, because there were a lot like under Trump that came out in droves just purely in reaction to just the horridness of the people who reacted against the small left movements and supported Trump, and who Trump endlessly defended because they're his most radical base.
I mean, that's good, like, for a start and stuff. But I think we should, uh, see as an this whole thing happening, this whole movement happening, and as an opportunity for uh, developing a more affirmative, uh, a more positive, and I don't mean positive as good, okay? I mean positive as having values by its own inherent values. Uh, by building a positive leftism, not just reaction against capitalism, but also uh, deeply rooted in historical conscience, historical analysis, and
Absolutely.
dialectical materialism. That, as I previously said, it's absolutely important for as a weapon for the proletariat.
Absolutely. And in America, there's a lot of people that want this, but the issue is we have a lot of these blue Republicans from the pre-Obama era that are still around, and they're like, "Oh, socialism is not getting us votes, it's scaring away the centrists," even though it's the claims of socialism that brought out millions of more voters in the droves. Hassan Piker was going on about this, is supporting like the DSA and denouncing a lot of these, as I always call them, blue Republicans, who were like, "Oh, we need to tone back on all this stuff. We need to try to get the centrist Republican voters back on our side." Like that's not the concern when the left is the majority of the voting population and will be the majority of the voting population. Yes, in Republican areas, you're going to lose these primaries. We aren't going to deplatform ourselves just to make more of the country blue. Because in the end, if we remove what the power behind the leftist movements, then it isn't really leftism at all. It's just, oh, we got the people we kind of like in power. And that's really the
Yeah.
Biden phenomena because he's an incredibly conservative guy who really hasn't upheld any of his liberal and his radical socialist promises at all. He went from a $7 trillion infrastructure plan to like a 1 trillion one, and probably even less than that. Because,
Hello.
oh, can you hear me? Oh shit! You dropped out. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What was the last thing you heard from me?
Yeah, you were so talking about how it came from 7 trillion or something like this about
Yeah, yeah,
Biden and
yeah. His
he's
infrastructure
extremely
plan went
conservative.
from 7 trillion to like 1 trillion. It'll probably be even less because of Republicans disagreeing. The fact that we have to like, bend the knee to Republicans to try and get anything done is just horrid. And the Democrats tried to solve this, but they couldn't really unite enough to solve this because a lot of the centrist Democrats, these blue Republican forces, are very against it. And the simple fact of the matter is, we need to adopt Republican strategy because the Republicans under Trump had the strategy of getting rid of anyone who didn't support Trump. Well, we need to get rid of the Democrats who aren't enough of our base. We need to get rid of these conservative centrists who side with Democrats. We need to get these people out of the government. And we need to put out the ones who actually have our interests in.
I agree, I agree. And since we're talking about, strategies and stuff like this, I want to hear something about like it's more broad again, not focusing on America, but uh, I like, for instance, there's obviously a lot of leftist ideologies, right? You have feminism, you have anarcho-feminism, you have insurrectionary anarchism, anarchism itself, whatever, yada yada yada. Anyway, I think it's these movements, these forms of analysis are all good as tools for analysis of power, of capital, and stuff like this. But I think if we truly want a organized, centralized, and unified left community that actively will actively fight against capital and stuff, I think we should adopt a strict Marxist approach,
That
at
see
least
that's
on a on a material level, on a political strategy level, because yeah, these people, especially postmodernism, I always praise postmodernism here, but mostly as a tool for analysis. I don't think postmodernism is very radical on its own. But go on, go ahead.
see there. I agree with this notion wholeheartedly, but it's a bit idealistic. There has to be an understanding. Even Orthodox Marxists will disagree on things. I'm more of a Marxist-Leninist myself, even though I have a lot of agreements with Orthodox Marxists and critical theorists. Even right now, we need to get focused more on like education and need to get bringing more people who should be on our side to our side. I don't think that the left's strength isn't the idea of centralized, homogenous unity. Rather, our
No, no,
strength
I
is
didn't
in
mean something like this. I didn't mean
the,
something. I mean on a more strategy level. What we do actively. Not
yeah. I think
uh.
unapologetic
For instance,
Marxism, yes.
let me just use a kind of an example. For instance, fighting racism. Of course, you can fight on a more atomized way, like did the Black Panthers, for example. Of course, they were Marxists, but still they were very atomized, very not not very broad per se. And they clearly had a goal of ending systemic racism and oppression of Black people and stuff. Uh, and I think this is all good, but I think we form a more unified in the sense of, okay, let's destroy capital, because destroying capital we pretty much destroy every other form of oppression. I think this is a more direct and a better approach to it. I'm not saying like a homogenous kind of resistance. Okay, I'm just talking about a focused kind of resistance.
Hmm.
Yeah, my just
Well, I agree, and I think we need more unapologetic Marxism, but I think there's also a lot of truth to the statement that unapologetic Marxism just brings out unapologetic racism. You know,
how so?
Well, I mean, the reactionary movement under Trump, there's just police killings just increased, and then the
Oh,
backing
okay.
for them and
No,
justification
no.
of them.
I misinterpreted. I thought you were saying like Marxists were getting racist.
No, no, unapologetic Marxism just brings back reactionaries being unapologetically racist. And
Okay, I see. Go on. Hello.
and wait, can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think this just clearly we need not play into the same stagnant culture war that we've been playing into. We need to push forward with the fact that we are the political majority in some sense. It's and we need to push forward within reforming ourselves. And there's a lot of this talk of like left unity, but the left unity is always talked for by the people who really just aren't left at all. These centrist people always want us to back them. It's what happened under Biden, and we need to elect more left people, even if they're moderate leftists, just to push the Democratic Party more left. We need more radical reforms. We need more radical approaches. We need more actual things being done.
I agree. I
We can't.
wholeheartedly agree.
No one understands what
Hmm.
unity is until we agree to unite under someone at the voting poll. You know, and I think the
It's
notions of a disunified left is incorrect, mostly in the sense of when push comes to shove, we will all back and support whatever left movement there is, because we know that's the only way anything's going to work out under democracy. And so this means we need to push for more left movements within ourselves, and then hopefully that more people will back those as a result. It's not so much, again, that socialism is scaring people away, but that centrism is scaring people away.
I agree. I agree. I just don't think I agree too much with the idea of. Yeah, I mean, it's good, I suppose, for now to elect more left-leaning people on the Democratic Democrat Party. Try to elect more left-leaning people in general in our government and stuff. But I think we should focus more on like unionizing and forming movements and stuff like this, going out protests and shit like this.
Oh, union
I think it.
movements are, you have to understand, there's very the only safeguards we have for union movements is you're not allowed to be fired for suggesting them or being part of them, which is like the last safeguard for them, because otherwise, like, Amazon brutally crushes them because the companies can afford to buy advertisements and force train people and just show out so much information like, oh man, $50 union fees is so much, and it's going to overcomplicate things. And then, I'm part of a union under my job, and it's so much nicer. And then you have people who work in like the construction industry who are part of like under construction unions. They get paid like $20 an hour, get full health benefits, get what people have in Europe because they're in unions. And so, um, and there's also actually, especially in rural areas, there's this concept of like union people being like um, overpaid sissies or whatever and just not doing enough work. They're not punishing themselves enough for capitalism. They're not,
You mean
it's
like you mean like unionizing exclude some people or something like this? Exclude some part of the proletariat?
no, most people in America don't want any parts of unionization. Because they've
No,
been
yeah.
because there's this culture war against it, especially for like a lot of rural areas. There's this idea that, work is this self-flagellation. It's this masochistic ideal where you're punishing yourself for capital. So the idea that you should be punished less for more is it just to them makes no sense and seems weak because they've been taught to be macho men. But when in reality, all it succeeds in is suppressing themselves.
So you mean like they're too caught by ideology, so that hinders the progress the unions can make. Also, because historically speaking, I mentioned that excluding people because historically speaking, uh, there were a lot of people with sentiments like leftist people who thought uh, unionized workers were privileged. They had way better uh, conditions than
Hmm.
people who were out of union, so that kind of excluded these people and stuff.
Yep.
And also, there's the whole problem of the lumpen proletariat. I don't know if you ever heard this term. Have you heard of it? Lumpen proletariat, like this. Let me write real quick.
I don't know what you mean.
I'm gonna write. I'm going to write it. To be honest, I don't have a very made
I
opinion.
I don't know what you mean by this. Can you define it for me?
It's basically what Marx defined as the unorganized proletariat, which is pretty much the criminals, the drug dealers, and that kind
Hmm.
of stuff. You know,
Well,
they're like the edge of the edge. You know, they're not part of a working class in the sense that they're not under a factory, right? I
well,
mean, in the times of Marx, right? Because pretty much you only worked on a factory at that time, right? But in basically means all the criminals and stuff like this. The peripheral part of the proletariat. I don't have much of a formed opinion. I just mention it because in some way we're kind of excluding them when forming unions. So that's also a problem. A problem that Bakunin tried to solve. He tried to integrate the lumpen proletariat into the whole movement
hmm.
with anarchism and stuff.
And then you had Nazism with its whole Untermensch ideal, which is where these people are criminal lowlifes. They should just be killed.
Yeah, I mean, uh, I'm not against uh assimilating, quote unquote, the lumpen proletariat, but you gotta see, like, in Brazil, at least, this has brought some problems. For instance, uh back in the military dictatorship, the leftists would go to jail and they would smuggle. Is it smuggle, like smuggle, smuggle?
Smuggle, just to smuggle. I
Yeah,
mean,
like,
they would sneak
yeah, it's
supplies in, food in for him.
yeah. They would smuggle Marxist and anarchist books and stuff
Yes.
to the prisons, right? To radicalize the prisoners and the criminals and stuff. Well, but it sounds good and stuff, but this actually brought a whole new problem, which it was a faction called Comando Vermelho, which would be Red Command. And this faction actually got way more theocratic and way more hierarchical than actually socialists. They're pretty much a drug dealing uh, pyramid. They're,
But are
they're
they
not socialists at all.
but are they egalitarian in their interests at least? I mean,
No,
no.
not at all. No, they're fully hierarchical.
So
Like
they just
you have
embrace the bureaucracy of Soviet socialism and not the socialism.
yeah, and I don't. I mean, it's a very convoluted story, but since they also got caught, by bourgeoisie ideals and stuff because they were a pretty uh reactionary class. Imagine you're a fucking criminal in the 60s. You like a random criminal without knowing about Marx and stuff. Like, you would be pretty much a macho man. Like, oh yeah, fuck the gays, fuck women. Women should work at home and stuff like this. They grew up with this reactionary kind of backstory, and this brought to them a lot of Catholic ideals, and that's why they became more hierarchical, and with selling drugs, they also got a lot of money. With this money, they control a lot of the city of Rio de Janeiro, which is the metropolitan city here in Brazil.
Isn't
Anyway,
it the capital?
it's no, the capital is uh, cacete, eu esqueci.
Yeah,
Caraca.
Rio de Janeiro is the only city any American knows about because of the Christ the Savior statue.
But no, it's not the capital. Anyway, the capital is Brasilia or Brasilia. How I don't know. Whatever. It's Brasilia. Anyway, it's like the whole thing of the Red Command is pretty fucking messy. They kind of got radicalized into socialism. They even use socialist talking points, but they're not socialist at all.
Hmm.
So that's why I have a very mixed opinion on the lumpen proletariat whole thing. of
Well,
integrating
I
them into
think
the movement.
an interesting thing in America, because we have the most imprisoned people in the world, more so than China, um, a lot of our prisons, you'll see people radicalizing, but not towards leftism. They'll be radicalizing towards Satanism, or the two big groups being Islam and Nazism, because they're specifically radicalizing towards stuff that's like culturally bad. Communism is something that's culturally railed against up until recently. It was always treated as something like, oh, it failed. It's a whatever thing. Like it's gone, guys. Okay. But whenever you bring up Islam, Satanism, or Nazism, it's like, what are you doing? Stop. That's bad. That's a no-no. And those movements are focused very much on like a cult-like nature. Well, not so much Islam, but radical Islam certainly, like Wahhabist
I see.
Sunnism. And
But
so,
do you think the lumpen proletariat could, be assimilated into the whole movement, or do you think they're incompatible with the whole thing?
I think this very same philosophical issue is the divide between Antifa and Black Lives Matter, because despite the fact that they are literally the same organizations, like they're fighting the same group of people, they're both fighting against the police and systemic oppression within America. You know, they just have this. They're just fighting because for senseless reasons. Black Lives Matter wants to prioritize their movement, and Antifa wants no priorities, and Antifa doesn't want any organization or structures because they're primarily anarchist, then like radical liberal socialists. They're the issue with Antifa is they want to go up against fascism in an anarchist manner, which works a lot, but Black Lives Matter wants to go up against fascism in a more organized manner. And so they definitely there's definitely a lot of CIA influence in there. Like you cannot tell me the CIA has not gotten involved in that. Like that's literally the one thing the CIA gets involved in all the time. And so there's definitely been like a divide being made between the groups, despite the fact that they are one and the same. It
Yeah,
should it goes well beyond the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They're fighting for the same thing. Black Lives Matter is just a more specific version of it.
yeah,
And
but like it's but like, do you think I'm gonna sound like a religious lunatic by saying this, but I don't have any other words in my mind. But like, do you think that you can convert the lumpen proletariat, convert the criminals and stuff into radicals? Because they get fucked by the system, right?
mhm.
They get fucked a lot. So it's almost like logical, right? We think, oh yeah, they're probably gonna radicalize themselves. The system fucked them. It's only natural they would radicalize, but not at all. Most of the time, they're pretty marked. They're pretty caught up by reactionary talking points, and reactionary ideology.
Well, you have to understand they're still fighting to get up towards the upper echelons of the system. They're still trying to become rich and stuff. And furthermore, I think we should worry less about former criminals in our among Marxism and worry more about how the governments may try to criminalize Marxism. I don't
Yeah,
think
that's also a very big problem.
an issue we should worry about is not so much about bringing Marxism to the prisons, but Marxists being brought to the prisons. And after that, I'm gonna need to take a quick break. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure. No, no worries. I might be playing something on music bar. Hey, what do I want to play? Okay.
I'm gonna need to turn this down real quick.
What?
I'm just turning down the music.
Okay.
I don't really care about copyright claims so long as it isn't a copyright strike. Because then the video gets taken down. I couldn't care less about the copyright claims. Hell, on the other one,
Alright.
the JDR music was copyright claimed because it's technically owned by like a distribution company. I think it's like the film footage as well.
I
Which
thought they only took away the
yeah, they take away the
uh,
monetization. It doesn't get struck down,
yeah.
but unless they decide to strike it down.
I see.
Otherwise, sorry for taking a little too long. I got hungry, so I
That's
put
cool.
some canned potato stew on the pot.
Well, when you wanna go back to the discussion, just tell me.
Oh,
I don't know if you're.
we can get back right into it right now.
Okay, let me stop the music real quick.
We could have had it in there. Yeah, it's fine. This is that artist you had me listen to the one time?
Yeah, I love this already.
Yes,
I
yes, you
mean,
were telling me.
if you wanna keep it going, the song make the song keep going. Your choice, really.
Nah, I feel like feel like there's too much dissonance between the two. I feel
Okay.
doesn't fit our discussion at all.
Fair enough. I just I wanted to add the because the Foucault's main book. I mean, it's not his main book. It's debatable what his main book is, but my favorite one is Discipline and Punishment, which, as the name suggests, it talks a lot about the prison complex and the evolution of the delinquent, as he describes, which is the image of the criminal that uh, has been made by the state and the capitalist ruling class and stuff. Uh, I actually want to talk about the how this is also a hinder for the assimilation again, quote unquote assimilation of the lumpen proletariat to the movement. I know you were saying about the how that we should fear more about the Marxists being called criminals and stuff, but I think it's also a very important matter to talk about the lumpen proletariat because these are a very peripheral class of they're also being very oppressed, although they hold very fucked up views. Anyway, but Foucault was he does a very historiography of the criminal class, how it came to be, and how it came to how it changed over time and stuff like this. And what is very interesting is that when he gets to the 19th century and onwards, into his time, is that what happens is that uh the upper class, the capitalists and the philanthropists and the owners of prisons, they started to consciously making criminals. They wanted to make criminals um the prisons in the prison complex. They wanted to make criminals because these criminals were so petty. They were so fucked up on an economic level that they pretty much would accept anything. They would accept being informants for the police. They would accept uh, integrating into radical groups. So they would like integrate into leftist groups and denounce people and stuff like this to the police and stuff like this. You know.
Mhm.
uh, so what Foucault described is a very interesting process where these delinquent, as he calls predictable criminals, they're predictable. They are controlled by the state pretty much, and the police complex. Uh, and these so they have a very clear goal. These kind of criminals, they have a very clear goal of disorganizing and pretty much bringing out the movements that are trying to make any changes in society. So
Mhm.
and it's even interesting because a lot of the people at the time, like even the proletariat, the poor people, used to send letters to state officials talking about how the criminality is getting worse, how they should make punishes more severe. So the proletariat itself was kind of fucking themselves up, because they were wishing for a more uh, authoritarian state.
Yes.
And then that was the goal of making these petty criminals, as Foucault puts it, or the delinquents. They are predictable. They can be controlled, and they can fuck up the movements that are actually trying to bring some change to the social structure. So that's again a whole another dimension of how problematic it is to assimilate the lumpen proletariat into the main movements.
Okay. I mean, I think that it's true. think it still falls under the phenomena of just you can't implement all proletariat into the movement. And I think really, I mean, criminals arise from the state. This is dialectical materialism at its finest. Criminals are either being made by people who just genuinely aren't criminals, being sent to jail or prison and being turned into criminals, or people who are turn themselves into criminals due to either social pressure or economic pressure, or in some radical cases, political pressure. And I think, well, I think if we maintain the state's notion of all these people are criminals, and I think that we would never be able to implement them into our movements then. But I think if we look at a lot of these people who are, especially in America's case, unjustly imprisoned, and look at them for who they are, it's not really a matter of the lumpen proletariat, it's just the regular proletariat. And we should probably, not even probably, most definitely dismantle the institutions that create criminals and
Yeah,
enforce and
that's
reinforce criminal
that's a
culture.
given. Yeah, I agree with you. That's pretty much a given. We should destroy these power systems and stuff like.
But I still, I mean, I understand that's still probably going around the question of the big question that's being asked is to what to do with criminals in the first place. And there's a lot of stuff. There's reform, but there's definitely a lot of criminals who are opportunists and definitely seek the idea of being like the bourgeois, making their way to the top.
And this
And
is actually quite funny because I'm sorry for interrupting you, but as far as I know, Bakunin tried to insert these people into the movement because he thought the regular proletariats were being too caught up by the bourgeoisie ideology. But anyway, go on. I'm sorry for
no,
interrupting.
no, it's me who's interrupting you too much. Um,
That's cool.
I mean, as my point was with Antifa and Black Lives Matter, the state, capitalism may seem like it oppresses people on a person by person basis, but in reality, capitalism doesn't really see race, religion, speech, or anything. It just sees people who are where it is capable of extorting wealth from. stratifying, and oppressing. And from that matter, we probably shouldn't keep the same systematic notions of oppression when treating these people. And yes, I hate that I'm in the situation where I'm saying this, but they should not divide us. You know, even though that movement was dumb and inevitable, leading to just
I'm
endless
sorry.
trolling and
Wait a bit.
division.
Wait a bit. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Wait a bit. Okay, talk. Talk.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you only one on one side of my earbuds. Wait a bit.
That sounds like an earbud issue.
Ah, goddamn. Wait a bit. Okay, talk.
Hello?
God damn it. Just wait a bit. Ah, okay, again. Say something. Keep saying stuff.
Hello? 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 Hmm? Hmm?
Okay. Okay, I think I stopped. Okay, go on.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah, I
I
can.
can kind of hear myself though.
You can?
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo sometimes. Yeah, I haven't heard one in the last 5 seconds though, which is good. Uh,
Oh, God. Okay.
how much did you
uh,
how much did you hear though?
You not much actually, because I was trying to fix the problem. You were I actually forgot what you were talking about.
I
Was
was talking. We were talking about the Lumen proletariat, the matter of
the
what they
bourgeoisie.
are, how they are, what to do, and how.
Yeah, you were talking about how capitalism doesn't see religion, race, or
Yeah,
whatever.
it may
Okay, go
seem
on.
like it does, and I mean, the people who live under it certainly do. The people who are on top certainly sees this, but the system itself doesn't really see by this. It just sees something that can be oppressed and that something that wealth can be extorted from in some way. And from that matter, we shouldn't be seeing those unless we want to fall under these systems of oppression once again. And in
Oh yeah.
regards to, the lumpen proletariat or just those who are jailed, whether rightfully or wrongly, we shouldn't be taking on the notions of referring to these people as criminals because they've committed crimes. Their people are more than just the wrongdoings they have done against society and the state.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, on a moral level, I have no problem with not at all. I think we like in a perfect idealized view of the whole movement. I think we should integrate these people, but I fear that they might hinder the movement, the whole movement, because of the whole issue I told you about of the
Mm-hmm.
historical uh, role that these petty criminals have had in dismantling radical movements, but also because they could potentially become even something bigger and not socialist at all, as I
Well,
said about the
we
radical
we
man.
we live in a situation where the movements are not smaller, they're massive. And so as long as there is a system of checks and balances, I am not too worried. And I'm more worried in the sense of that these people might be wrongfully oppressed because the notion of their criminality continues on.
Oh, I see. Even under the Marxist view, you mean?
Yes.
I see.
I
Yeah, well,
think
certainly
I
Marx didn't have a very good opinion on these people.
well, I not everything Marx said was true.
No, I
Marxism is
know, I
the
know.
basis of what his political beliefs were. And not to defend the notion of, oh, it was a different time. Marx was pretty horrible for having a lot of the beliefs that he did have, but at the same time, Marxism is not the adapting of Marx as a person. It's the adapting of like his literary and his political and philosophical works. It's not a matter of who he was as a person.
No, yeah, I see, I know. It's just that he, well, not a lot, but kind of touches on the subject from time to time in his books.
Mm.
Not much though. That's why that was one of the main uh, antagonisms, say, the main conflicts between Bakunin and Marx, because Bakunin thought they should integrate the lumpen proletariat,
Uh,
Remarks thought they were too disorganized. They
hold on,
would just hinder the proletariat works.
hold on. I need to check up on my potato stew. I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right, I'm back. And I must just say something on off topic though. I have this addiction to vitamin gummies. I keep it regulated simply by not having a lot of them, but I think they're like the perfect mixture of gelatin and sugar, like not too much sugar. And it's the notion of them being healthy that like I swear one of these days
Yeah,
I'm gonna lose it and then just be one of those people who dies of too many vitamins.
that's very specific, and I don't know what you're talking about at all.
Oh, do you not have gummy vitamins? Um,
This is like the no, I don't think I no. It's like a bar of vitamin, like
no,
a
no.
small bar.
They're these
No,
chewable candy-like gummies that have vitamins in them.
no, I never saw them.
No good. I hope you never find them. Hope you are never
I
afflicted
mean,
with the affliction I go through.
I'm not much into sugar, So,
Well, they're primarily a health thing. Some of them are sugar-free.
oh, I see. I mean, I'm kind of addicted to coffee, but like not
Everyone
much
is.
because
Everyone. It literally caffeine caffeine is like if religion is the opium of the masses, then like caffeine is like it's just the caffeine of the masses. I mean, everyone consumes it in some way or some form because
yeah,
it's the perfect drug for the capitalist system.
yeah. But I used to drink that shit a lot. Like I'm talking about 10 cups per day,
Mm-hmm.
even
Mm-hmm.
more. But my friend, was an old friend. She told me to stop with this because I
Yes.
I would probably fucking die.
Yes.
And so yeah, today nowadays I like only drink 2 cups at best, on a good day.
It's why I try to diet myself and like diet or sugar-free soda so that way I'm not getting all that sugar, but at the same time I'm getting caffeine, but not in large copious amounts, just in small controllable amounts throughout the day.
Well,
But
that's good. That's good. It's horrible to be addicted to that shit, man.
it is. I've got tried to get off of it many times, and this is really the only situation where I'm at my. It's the best I can have it. But
Man,
this ties in perfectly with what we're saying though, because you have to think about it. So much crime, modern crime, is based around drugs.
it's
I
true.
mean, it's what we were
Like,
saying yesterday. We're like drugs and alcohol have always existed, but only in the modern era have they become crises with people dying.
Indeed.
Eh,
And they're very profitable business also.
yes,
Sell drugs in there.
because now profit is a factor. And
Exactly. I mean, I don't. h- Have you lost the article again that I've sent you? I mean, twice now about the criminality in Brazil, the
the
70s and 80s.
violence. No, I
Yeah,
apologize. I'm not like I convinced it's I keep forgetting because I'm like, man, I really need to read this. I want to read this, and I'm like, yes, I'm going to read this.
it's a pretty.
I hate to be a redditor, but I do have ADHD, so it's like, man, and I'm off my meds for the Air Force, so it's like, man, I'm going to read this, and then I completely forget about it as soon as I click on another Discord channel. Like, oh wow, funny memes.
Funny memes. It's
Yeah.
cool. It's cool though, but it's there's a very interesting idea in the whole article that I remember quite vividly that I just sent you this article because we were talking about Byung-Chul Han
Hmm.
and about the whole, remember the whole I other thing, and we are narcissistic and stuff. What this article has, it has a very good anthropological and historical analysis, so that's pretty good. But deep down, like kind of hidden in the text, there's a very good uh metaphysics going there, like a metaphysics of criminality. If
Hmm.
you're, paying attention to the whole thing, and one of the ideas that I find very interesting is it's how it's a teacher, the I think her name is Maria or something like this. I can't remember right now. But anyway, she basically says how in the modern neoliberal landscapes uh, in Brazil and of course other countries, Europe and shit, uh, we are so caught up by this idea of competition, right? I mean, it's the basis of capitalism is competition. That it got to the point where the criminals, the oppressed, be it the oppressor or the oppressed, are caught by this ideology of competition, and they put themselves as the protagonist of the world. Again, the narcissistic notion that Byung-Chul Han explores in his book, and by doing so, we basically incorporate some sort of toxic masculinity where we must be at the top. We must be at the top no matter what. And this goes again. This goes from the petty criminal to the big, uh, big landowner. Of course, she's not defending the landowner, saying, "Oh yeah, it's all the same." Fuck is. It's not a nihilistic article, but I think it's a very interesting idea uh, how pervasive the neoliberal ideology is, because it has infiltrated, it has um, sickened even the oppressed people, and to think that they should be at the top. They should, and this is why crime. Of course, there's a lot of material and historical reasons, but this whole thing about competition is one of the reasons why crime is was so big at the time. Because it's pretty much you're for yourself. Go survive. You must be at the top no matter what. So you do crimes to survive and stuff like that.
And where is Brazil now?
It's fucked. I mean, we still have a skyrocket rate of violence.
But would you say
Like
nothing has
50%.
changed? Because there's certainly a lot you were referring to in the past tense. So something must
Oh
have
yeah.
changed.
Oh no, of course it has changed. I mean, it, the violence that was in the 70s and 80s was like the peak. We're still fucked a lot. You saw the what Commissar Brazila sent on the UGOPNIC server. You saw how fucked up our country is. But
Yes.
but the 70s and 80s is like the peak. It's just man. Have you ever watched City of God? It's a very famous movie. I think it's famous even internationally.
I've heard of it, but I've not watched it now.
Oh, it's basically it's part in 60s and part in the 70s, and it portrays the violences that happened in this lands of Rio de Janeiro. And um, I don't know why I talk in an English manner, when when talking about my own country shit. Like I just mentioned Rio de Janeiro as Rio de Janeiro, but anyway. Uh, what I was gonna say? Okay, okay. Basically, as I said, as I was saying, it was pretty much the peak. Like violence was pretty much everywhere at the time, even in São Paulo. And nowadays it's a lot less because I don't know. I really don't know why it has lessened. Partly because the military dictatorship went down, so there was, with less oppression, there's bound to be less criminality. This is a proven historical fact, pretty much. But but I mean, we also have a lot of corruption, a lot of politics, robbing money and stuff like this. So Brazil has changed. Certainly, we have a lot less violence than we used to have, but it's not even a good change that you look at the past and think, oh yeah, now the country is a lot better. No, it's like, okay, we're still fucked, but I guess I have a leg now.
I know. I can't entirely speak for this issue, but I've heard it a lot, like in Russia and a lot of other Eastern European countries. The 90s were the worst time to be alive ever because of the crime skyrocketing in ways never before thought or seen in those countries. And a lot of them say that like things haven't fully changed since then, other than a massive decrease in violence. That was the true
You
shift
mean
between the
Eastern European countries?
Boris Yeltsin era and the Putin era. Or as they like to call him, Tsar Boris the Drunkard and Tsar
What did I do?
Ilyich the Terror.
My earbud is telling again. Okay, keep talking so I can fix.
Hello, 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 hello,
Okay, it's
hello.
good. It's good. Go back to what you were saying.
Okay. Um, or as they are colloquially known, Tsar Boris the Drunkard, or as I assume, Tsar Ilyich the Terror. Or they just call Putin the Tsar because he likes to be thought of as a dictator. He likes to be thought of as an autocrat. That's why they blatantly rig all their elections, and nobody goes out to vote anymore. So he controls his own opposition, owns his opposition media, and owns all the media in the country. And he lives in this $100 billion czar-style mansion where he dresses up like a czar behind closed doors. It's
Yes,
just
I
awful.
didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he revealed it himself through a lot of his own controlled opposition media.
Holy shit!
Yeah, look it up, dude. Look at Putin's mansion. It's the biggest. Well, it's not even a mansion. It's a palace. He wants to be thought of as the czar, and people call him the czar because it's just how things are.
Damn. Phew. But yeah, this violence, discussion about violence, are pretty complex discussion because criminality itself is a pretty multifaceted problem.
On America, we refer to violence as either justice or gang violence, and when I say that, I mean when the minorities do it, it's bad, but when the police do it, it's good. It's because it's the system doing it, and the system can never be wrong because it's a neoliberal democracy. And if it ever did
Uh,
wrong, it's your fault for voting in the wrong. Never the
that
state's
kind
fault.
of logic pretty common among the military dictatorship back in the 60s and 70s
Mm.
among in Brazil. I mean, it only makes sense, right? The military dictatorship was implanted by the American government,
Oh yeah,
so there's that.
we just did the same thing in Bolivia, and we most certainly did the same thing with Bolsonaro. Just you know,
Dude, it's so fucked up, really. I mean, there's so many conservatives among my country they're like, oh yeah, back in the times of the military dictatorship, there was no violence. People were morally correct. All that crap. There was no talk about homosexuality. What the fuck is that shit, dude? It's gross, really. So fucking gross.
You see, the fact that opposition to homophobia can only be based in absurd religious morality and not in any general morality, general moral ethics, or general science really scares people. It really scares conservatives, especially because if they have to accept homosexuals, they have to accept that they're just absurdists, that everything they believe in is just dumb and wrong. And that's why they fight hard against homosexuality because it's just homophobia has truly become the linchpin to their ideals.
And their traditions and stuff like this.
Yeah, because homophobia does make no sense whatsoever. And I'm not speaking at it from a point of bias because like I'm bisexual and my sister is a lesbian. It's just common sense that like it genuinely bigoted to be homophobic. There's no other way around it.
Yeah, I mean, even it's even more absurd to think that the people who defend the individual liberties, who quote unquote defend the individual, are homophobic and
Individual liberties
homophobic.
is just white liberties. It's so frustrating to see American culture seep into other countries and really ruin things.
And I mean, it's not even just America. This goes back even to Enlightenment. There's a very famous Foucault quote where he says that the lights who brought up the reasoning and stuff like this, who brought up modern landscape, also brought with it a lot of shadows. There's a lot of shady stuff that happened since the 18th century to now.
Hmm.
It's, uh, the
Enlightenment seeks
idea.
to enlighten all the wrongs of the world except for the wrongs that it itself has brought upon.
Exactly, exactly, and also it's very Eurocentric. So there's that.
Oh yeah, incredibly Eurocentric. It's disgustingly Eurocentric. I'm very
Yeah,
anti-Western Europe, anti-Western European ideals. So whenever conservatives or these neoliberal types, oh, they're against the Western world. Yes, I am absolutely against the Western world. I am for the destruction of its oppressive notions because obviously the Western world is just a bunch of bad ideas and wrong ideas, and wherever it has gone, it has brought only terror and destruction.
that's true. I'm also against the West, bro. Even because they even had like a fucking justification. We're bringing fucking progress to these barbaric people.
The only progress that's ever been made has been progress towards barbarism. A new future has been
Well, bro,
built, and one founded within the ideals of the past.
you can also see this by their views on Middle Ages. They think it's only barbary. I mean, the whole concept of the Middle Ages being a hole in human history comes from the Enlightenment ideas.
Yeah, the Dark Ages, like what? If, I don't see how they were the Dark Ages since they lasted so long. Yeah, there was a lot of bad stuff going on, but there was a lot of art from that period too. It was more than just backwards ideals. There was a lot of important stuff happening then that needs to be focused on. And then that brings me to,
Exactly, and
especially since you brought up homophobia, a lot of modern fake historians like to think, oh, dude, it was the homosexuals who destroyed the Roman Empire. What? That was integral to Roman culture for like so long. Like,
what the fuck?
no, they didn't. They were there since the beginning.
What
To the
about the Greeks? Do they talk how about Alexandria?
no,
Alexander fucked up because of gays too? What the
they
hell, dude?
don't mention the homosexuality of the Greeks because doing having to bring up the fact that like the Spartans like fucking young boys, you know, and like fucked each other before battle to raise like their manliness or whatever. That is very anti-modern masculinity, and it's another thing because homosexuality is, if they accept it, they have to accept that their ideas of masculinity are toxic and incoherent and senseless. To accept homosexuality is to accept that toxic masculinity exists as its opposition. So maybe there is a lot
Also,
of good that can be done by really pushing towards LGBTQ
I mean,
rights culturally.
I mean, going kind of another subject. You mentioned, toxic masculinity, and you know, it's like uh, I wouldn't say it's a complex topic. I mean, it's pretty obvious what is wrong with masculine sexuality and uh its em- emphatic emphatic nature on power relations and being powerful and stuff like this. Uh, but also I like to analyze how we portray, especially among memes, because when I go to the Gopnik server and I go to shit posting stuff, and sometimes I see some memes like portraying the leftists as shads. You have like these fucking muscular guys. Of course, being muscular is not inherently toxic masculinity, but I fear sometimes that these memes, even though they're of course just for jokes, they also have a very strong potential for propaganda, and I fear that these kind of promote some sort of exacerbating masculinity.
I think leftist memes in their entirety, no matter how much I love them, are a proof of commodification of the revolution, left reactionaryism, as I mentioned before, and just in general, a proof of adapting leftism to modern capitalist culture, which is inherently self-destructive, self-hindering, and just bad. It's a bad idea. Maybe we should probably move against leftist memes. I was planning on doing some writings about this, but it's a complex issue. But in general, yes, I agree with you. But I think the issue is more so than just toxic masculinity seeping in through the memes. I think it's the entirety of right wing culture seeking into leftism in some way.
Indeed, indeed. I mean, there was this meme in specific
Hold on,
that I
I need
find
to get
pretty
my
fucking.
I need to get my final bowl. Hold your thought.
I know what. God damn it, these fucking earbuds. Ah, Jesus. Okay. Fuck.
I am back.
Okay, wait a bit. Keep talking so I can fix again my earbuds because these
Ah,
fucking suck.
now hello, hello, hello,
Okay,
hello.
okay.
Yes, all right.
Okay, okay, okay. As I was saying, there's this. It's just an example, but there's this meme that I find to be very disgusting, to be honest. Which is like there's a cool Chad leftist Leninist guy, There's an anarchist who's like a fanboy, sorta, and he's like, "Oh no, schools are systems of
Mm-mm.
do,
Oh, I've seen that.
doctrine."
I know. I sent you that meme. I've reposted it many times. It's you have the femboy anarchist, and it's like, oh, you're a tanky. Then you have the Chad Leninist who's like, oh, and you're a cutie, and then he's getting like
Yeah,
fucked because
yeah.
it's.
I find it to be pretty fucking disgusting, dude.
What do you
Yeah,
mean?
because it even puts like the idea that if you're passive, you're inferior. They're like, oh, they're cute. They
Mm,
should be fucked. By the shads and stuff. It's a very clear example to me of toxic masculinity
certainly.
inserting itself
I th-
into leftist memes.
I think this meme is incredibly complex and is the perfect thing for examination because I enjoy the meme because I definitely find the meme hot, right? Like I totally get the idea of finding anarchist femboys attractive, but more importantly, I mean, yeah, it's very toxic masculine notion of how homosexuality works. And also there's this whole political undertone to it, right? Because it implies that like the tankies will portray the anarchists, that they're just getting fucked, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah,
The meme is a
the anarchists
metaphor,
are like,
just
yeah,
like
the
oh
anarchists are
schools,
just like,
schools are slavery, while he's getting fucked by like the Leninist,
uh,
like
it like uh by default portrays certain ideas as weak, as
and portrays other ideas as strong, but at the same time portrays them as like obsessive. I mean, yeah, the meme won't be inappropriate. Wait, I probably have the meme somewhere within reach.
if you
Just,
can send it again, because I mean it's quite disgusting, but it's good for the discussion here.
yes, I
I
have it.
just don't like this meme. I don't like it all, and I'm not even an anarchist, Just ugh.
Here we go. There it is. There it is. On screen now. Okay. All right. There was so much more that I forgot. Yeah. Well, he has like the Catalonian flag on here. So this is obviously like, in addition, it's like, so clearly it's referencing like the Republican Spanish during the Spanish Civil War and like, the split between the Republican forces, between the anarchist Catalonians and the more authoritarian lefties on the right. I mean, like, the revolution. I didn't catch that part when I saw this meme. Revolution is authoritarian.
Yeah, I'm
Like
seeing that
what,
right now too.
dude? I did not catch that part to it, dude. Oh fuck.
It's just horrible, dude. I don't like this meme, not at all.
Like
I can't even laugh at this. Like,
I didn't
yeah,
see. I never found the meme funny. I just found the meme like hot. I thought it. I thought I looked at it through the gay perspective and not the. Oh wait, what's the political message this thing is sending? And this is super tank. This is like I'm pretty far into like the tank sphere, but this is a little too much. Like the revolution is not authoritarian. Yes, there needs to be an authority to safeguard and vanguard the revolution and to ensure that things get done, but the revolution is generally anti-authoritarian.
yeah, and also because it kind of like quite again by default portrays these ideas as weak, and it uses a
Yeah.
commonly weak character. It's the femboyish kind of character who is by default through these memes, perception a weak character. It also, I mean, I may be biased here because I'm not homosexual or in a part of the LGBT, but I'm certainly more uh feminine, you could say, or more like fragile in my
Hmm.
appearance. And when I look at this, look, dude, I just imagine a guy just saying, "I'm by default, I'm weak," I'm by default,
Hmm.
I'm a passive force, and I hate that. I hate to look at this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I
Of
noticed
course,
how like hardcore violent and like oppressive the implied act is, and it's like justifying it through like the Chad meme when like the whole Chad memes is as you said, toxic masculinity is righteous and stuff like that, so that's already being like presupposed at the start of this meme when you see the format, and now it's taking that thing that's like, oh, ultra authoritarian tankies are Chad and the anarchists should just submit to their ideology.
yeah, it all. Well, I might even add. I
And
mean, this
there's
is
some weird undertones in this when he says schools are slavery, with how younger he looks in comparison to him. And so not only does it like trying to say that, oh, anarchists are just young dumb teenagers, that does have some other messages to it. You were saying?
I mean, uh, I might even go as far. I don't know. Maybe, of course, the author could not be implying this. I really doubt he was, or
No,
she, or
I I, th-
they,
I think
they
they
were
were
maybe.
I think they were on like three layers of memeism and like abstraction, to the point that like none of this was being taken seriously. Like maybe it was probably being treated more as like a pseudo philosophical leftist phenomena of like, oh, this is how tankies treat anarchists on Discord. The Discord will always become the femboys of the strong tankies or whatever, just like a meme.
Yeah, and but also what I was gonna point is that there may be some sort of implying message here that the tanky is like the realist, and
Mm-hmm.
the anarchist like, oh, super idealist. Oh no, schools are slavery, and the Shad tanky, he knows the truth. He knows how reality works. He knows that he must the revolution must be authoritarian.
Yeah, and
It's
notice how this
it,
act through perceived like his blushing and like his drooling through through this implied pleasure is conceived as not only consensual but like when it's saying here it's like his ideology is being warped towards something that's like righteous. And I don't
dude.
even think I need to get
It's
into
like
how the Chad meme is literally the Nazi depiction of what like
and dude, like this depiction of the guy getting fucked from behind, like it's so much like the depiction of these, rape hentais, where the girl,
yes,
like they justify the act by saying the girl is enjoying it. It's pretty much the same thing, It's pretty much the fucking same thing because it
it
doesn't look consensual at all. It doesn't look consensual, but he sort of enjoys it through the in the meme.
certainly.
So it, dude, there's so many layers to how disgusting this shit is.
Yes,
Oh,
as I said, this meme has some genuine layers to it. Like everything can be analyzed.
oh shit. Dude.
And notice more. Okay,
We're
important
gonna
thing to
get
note.
obsessed. This whole podcast episode is just about this meme now.
It really is. Everything else is just leading up to it. It was all in the script, I swear.
I
But
swear.
but focus on
Uh,
like the Chad's body is not shown. All you see is like his communist gorilla scarf, implying he's like this violent warrior veteran type. And you're the tanky has just like he's given this small weak femboy frame.
yeah.
As in
Hmm.
like
He's, as I said, it's like the fragile appearance of the character automatically makes him weak, and that hurts me on a personal level
it's
because of my
like
appearance.
and it's like anarchists weak, authoritarians strong. When I mean that just makes no sense. Like what is it even? Like what is the end goal here?
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It's a
The
very
I
fucked
heart
up
running.
meme, dude. Holy shit.
It really is. It is absolutely proof as to what I said earlier that that memes have just been too much of a way for right wing culture to seep into modern leftism.
Yeah, I mean, holy crap.
Mm. But I mean, if this
Like
is
because
wrong, then like, what is?
yeah, and we're just talking about the toxic masculinity, the homophobia, and the very fucked up visions of homosexual relationships and stuff. But like, I mean, at this point, like, I want to analyze more news and see even more fucked up shit, like even defenses of consumerism. At some point, I wouldn't doubt there is some leftist memes that defend consumerism, some level, you know,
Notice
some
the
level of
notice how okay clearly, and maybe this should be the final examination of this meme in particular. How every line of dialogue has some has a lot of stuff put into it that implies how how they're being said. The tone is clearly being stated, and the tone in revolution is authoritarian is one of it's punitive. It's like he's being punished for being an anarchist.
yeah, and being punished for being an idealist.
Yes.
He has the wrong ideals,
Yeah, and his ideals
and he
are
thinks that
schools are slavery, like wrong.
it's portrayed as stupid, and weak and wrong and like it's well, holy shit, another fucking layer. Like the character, of course, it's a meme. It's not supposed to be fucking deep as hell, and teach you about the history of the leftist movement. But the character, the tanky character, is not arguing back. He's just asserting his authority through his force, through his power, because he's the
Truly.
Shad. He can do that because he's a Shad.
Yeah.
You know, again, it's non-consensual. It's disgusting. It portrays one character as strong, the other as weak. It's
And strength is
holy shit.
righteousness. It's very, very right wing and a
Yeah,
left wing meme.
yeah. Holy shit. You talk about it like this strength. I can't pronounce this.
Strength?
Oh shit. Yeah, I can't pronounce it.
Strength.
Strength.
That is a weird
Strength.
word, isn't it? Yeah, I just know it from
Uh,
having said it so many times.
yeah, well, what you just said, this whatever is right, righteous and stuff. Like this is so right wing. Like yeah, if you have the power, you can control people. Like
This
what the fuck is this doing in a leftist meme?
this is
Just
this
what the
is
fuck?
this is what social democrats and like democratic socialists mean when they say red fascism. You know, they aren't talking exactly about like tankies itself, but like this very style of like idealized interaction.
Indeed, and usually comes from people who overly idealize the USSR.
Certainly, yeah, I would say. But I mean, so this probably has to go into like more like Adorno authoritarian personality type stuff. But like, there's a lot of like leftists who, okay, they look at the world situation. They say capitalism is the predominant world power, neoliberalism is the predominant form of government, and they look into the past and they see the Soviet Union being this strong, powerful communist government threatening the world order. And
And
then so they like adapt to it, and they're like, oh, the Soviets did no wrong, Stalin did nothing wrong, which is a line I enjoy throwing around. I would certainly say that Stalin has done plenty wrong, um, especially.
it's good as a like a quick phraseology, But
He's certainly not Hitler, that's for sure. And it
yeah,
certainly, most of the things that people claim he's done, he simply and categorically could not have done. Um, and he's definitely
but I mean, this also brings about like another problem that if you keep repeating the same shallow ideas, it comes to a point where you start to believe in these, because you might, for
absolutely.
instance,
That's
it's that ironic distance. You're like, oh yeah, I know how complex this subject is, and I know there's multiple layers and shit, but you get so caught up by just saying quick phraseology that you just started believing in the more simple reality.
yeah. It's that's part of like the alt-right pipeline, these memes and jokes that people think are funny, but they also kind of agree with. And they consume more and more of these jokes, and then they need funnier and funnier, more radical ones, and that just pushes their ideas righter and righter until suddenly they're being flooded with, do you know that Jews control the world and stuff? Now we need to kill all the Jews. The Holocaust didn't happen, but it will happen again. It's kind of
Yeah.
philosophy, if I can even call it that.
I don't know if you know that channel, but Loner Box has a very interesting video where he says that he used to play a lot of World of Warcraft, right? And people used to make jokes and dark jokes talking about people of color and stuff like this. And at the time when he was a kid, he just thought it was just for fun, But these people, when it got to a certain time where there wasn't much people, many people on the server, uh these guys would like start spilling uh Reddit propaganda,
The
And,
beans.
oh yeah, yeah, like the Jews control the world. Oh yeah, people should refugees should be banned and stuff like this. It certainly like what you think is just a simple joke becomes something way bigger without you even noticing.
Yes.
Whew.
You want to find another meme to examine?
Yeah, sure. Why
Why are
not?
people posting chat logs? Like, what the fuck? I can't even read. Dude, is this a picture of someone's phone? I can't read this shit.
What you're talking about?
In ship hosting in Yugopnik's bar. They're oligarch socialists. What? Like George. What? George Soros is not a socialist, you dumb. Oh my god. I hate alt-right
What
people so
the?
much.
What are you? Where are you seeing this? Is this in shit posting?
Yeah, it's a bit up. It's a bit up. Someone
Mm.
posted some chat logs. It literally is
Oh, holy crap!
George Soros is an oligarch socialist. The fuck? What?
Dude, I can barely read what
Yeah,
what
you
is
kind of have
written.
to like maximize it and like zoom in.
To fears.
Organized
Oh my god, is
religion
this
and
a
social.
PragerU combine meme? I'm
Let me
posting
read
this.
a letter I recently received. Dear Dr. Breen, why has the Combine seen fit to suppress our reproductive cycle? Sincerely, a concerned citizen. Thank you for writing. Concerned? Of course, your question touches on one of the basic biological impulses, with all its associated hopes and fears for the future of the species. I find it helpful at times like these to remind myself that our true enemy is instinct. Instinct was
I have to see this full video of Dr. Breen PragerU. I gotta look that shit up.
What video?
PragerU, Dr. Breen. It's a bit above the chat logs. You'll find it above Tomboy Mind. It's pretty good if you know what PragerU is.
I do, I do.
PragerU is hated even by conservatives, which is the funny part, because conservatives even think they have bad takes.
I mean, it's because PragerU kind of tries to portray themselves as like centrists, some level, like some. I think there's a video where they say, "Oh yeah, extremism is bad. You shouldn't be far left, but you also should be fucking Nazi and stuff like this." Of course, they criticize more the left because they're fucking Nazis in disguise. But anyway,
Gay Wrath Month? Yes. The Gay Roller 2000. Yeah, and Prims are femboys, I will say.
what
Fuck.
the?
The
I
SpongeBob
cannot.
meme, though, the feeling when both Marxists and anarchists in America are barely distinguishable from mainstream liberals. Maybe visually, but not ideologically. Like, there's a lot to this. This is conservative propaganda. It's just untrue. Speak to anyone, and it's just not true. The pre-cracked egg. Oh my god, it's so
Save
it's
time, no man. What the fuck is this?
this can't be real. I will.
Holy shit.
I'm having a stroke. I'm having a conniption,
Also,
dog.
I just can't imagine a anarcho-primitivist as a fanboy. Like, it just doesn't connect.
Anarcho, have you met some actual Anprim people, dog? They are really into femboys.
Holy shit, dude. I think I've met one person who was like an unironic emperor.
Well, every Anprim is ironic to an extent. Like they want it, but they know it's ideal and they know it's like unreal. And one of the many ideals they have is like femboys, and they're always ironic with femboys, but they'll totally fuck some femboys.
Oh, why not?
What? I love your bitch. The fuck? You were the greatest boss. I will kill my. House search is called. The job was perfect. We are way ahead of schedule. We love this place. Yeah, okay. That'll never happen. Okay. What is this? You said you responded to this meme. Okay. I don't get it. What's going
What?
on here? This is Ann Prim looking at like Ann Prim art. People are laughing at him. It's this piece of like art or whatever. Yeah, whatever. The Stalin bog meme, the Stalin spoon meme. How nice.
Magnolia.
Where even... Where is leftism going? I feel like left reactionism is just too good of a definition to describe where the left is going. Because at the moment, it's the right wingers who are making all the moves, these right populist, reactionary conservative types. They're making all the moves. What are we doing?
We're sending memes and shit posting.
Memes
That's my
that are
practice.
memes that are kind of questionable.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, dude. Oh, I want some guy posted a very funny one, which was like Steven Seagal killing a bunch of kids and saying, "This is my practice." The guy's just killing kids because they can become cops in the future.
Oh, I've seen that one, yeah.
It's pretty fucking good. Oh yeah.
I think you just want to end it here.
Well, how much time have we have the
Two
is the
hours
recording?
and 11 minutes.
I think that's enough.
Yeah, I do think it's a good note to leave off on. Definitely a good question to ask yourself is like, what are you doing and what is the left doing to forward the movement beyond just reactionaryism? Just beyond just reacting to what the right has done again or the what new shit
Yeah,
the right has been doing.
and also we should think of ways to provide positive value to our movement, so we
Absolutely.
can establish our ideological ground.
Mm-hmm. All right.